Um, you guys are in for a treat today. So we are joined by our very own Deb Pervin. And Deb, can you just give a quick introduction? Because I don't think I do you enough credit because your background is so incredible. I
Well,
saw that you did some incredible financing plays to acquire a couple businesses, scaled them each to more than 100 million, and then sold those things. So can you just explain how you did that and the background with regards to your story? It's incredible. I'm so grateful that we get to serve you.
yes, and I do have a little introduction in the slides, so I can go through a little more detail. But skied on the U.S. ski team, went to Dartmouth and then Harvard, and then went to work at a bank, learned all the credit stuff from having a degree in business and a degree in government. So it was a joint degree at Harvard, and then grew a real estate empire with retail buildings and sold that. Yeah, I sold that. And then when we sold it, we took 5 years off and traveled the world on our sailboat with our kids. And then got lured back into developing a ski resort and golf course resort in Vermont that was in bankruptcy. So that was an exciting time, and grew that and sold that as well. So those are the that's my experience. What is interesting is that, you talk about the resort, I talk about the resort in terms of one big thing, but I was actually running 8 different companies at the same time because we had the ski area and the golf course and the sewer and water plant, municipality. So there are just all kinds of things. And I'll tell the rest of the story in a little bit.
Okay, I love it. And just to give some context as to why you came to Impact School, you're now building a program to teach other people all things profitability, finance, etc. So can you just give us some context on what you do with your clients all day, every day, so that our members here know why they should listen to you? Because clearly, I mean, taking a couple businesses to 100 million isn't enough credibility in itself. But, let's hear about what you do with your clients right now.
Well, so right now, and I've been doing this for more than 20 years, I built what I call the Business Owner's MBA. And it really was because even though I had all the experience both in banking and in running and in knowledge from schooling, I didn't really understand how all the pieces fit together. And so the first time, real estate is very entrepreneurial, but it's sort of a one-man shop. But when I opened the resort and I had 150 employees, I was like, oh my God, I'm missing so many gaps. And so what my business does now is it helps those messy middle clients, the clients who have started to, they're entrepreneurs, they've got a business that works, but they're not able to scale. I help them run that business. And I've been doing that for 20 years while I was in banking. But in banking, you don't have access to social media. That's something the bank controls for you, and they don't want you out there talking about whatever else you're doing, obviously. And so while I've been running a very successful program, I haven't been doing it full time until last year when I retired from banking and said, okay, I'm going to do this full time, but I don't have any knowledge of how to put it online. And so that is why I am here, and I'm learning a lot. So I have a well-defined ICP and a good offer that's been validated, but getting it out into the world is still a huge challenge. And I'm working hard with all of what I'm learning here. So it's been great.
Amazing. I love hearing it. And so just before we get started, I know you had some clarity yesterday with regards to the roadmap and how that's going to help you scale your business owner's MBA. So could you just share about that? Because I think it's hearing from you, someone that is so successful, seeing someone like you that still is learning, that still is sticking to the roadmap, that still wants to scale this thing, I think is very inspiring for others. So could you help us understand like the clarity that you had yesterday? And then let's get straight into your training about all things profitability, because I know I'm going to be taking notes on this one. We get to learn from each other.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the clarity really came from, I've been starting programs. So I have my mastermind group, which is really my main one, but then I had some one-on-ones. And then last year I started a community, and I'm like, this isn't working at all. But I didn't have it in the right order. I had the cart before the horse. I think I said that. So it's just a continuous learning activity. I'm just focused on one social media till I get that right. And it's just fun to continue to learn and to apply what I'm learning and see the progress.
Awesome. I love it, Deb. We're grateful that we get to serve you. So, hey, look, I'll hand it over to you here. For everyone that's here with us live, if you have any questions as we go throughout, type them into the chat. And Deb is looking only at her PowerPoint, so she's not seeing the chat. So what I'll do, she said it's okay if I interrupt her as you guys have questions. And also if I have questions that come to my mind, I'll just kind of, hey, Deb, we got a question, and then we'll answer that. So, Deb, I'm going to hand it over to you now, if that's okay. You're awesome. I'm grateful that we have you here, and yeah, let's get this program of yours scaling too, and get you in front of more people. So, cool. Let's just go for it.
Excellent. Okay, well, here we go. So I sort of broken it into an agenda. We're going to talk about accounting, finance, the income statement, and then cash flow modeling. Okay, so those are the key numbers that you need to be watching when you are working on your business and growing your business and looking at your profitability. So I'm starting right here. This is a weird looking machine. And this is just a story a little bit. I don't know about you, but do you remember the first time you actually had a thought that went, that's not right? Well, it happened to me when I was 5 years old. And I was graduating from preschool and going into kindergarten. And we were at the end of the year in a big auditorium, the kind with the raised dais and the big curtains. And at the end of the graduation ceremony, a magician type person came out with a machine like this. And in this big tray, he put all the school books and the teacher's manuals and crayons and, all the things that we had, learning tools. And at the other side came out these beautiful multicolored lollipops. And it was so cool. And the whole audience went, oh my God, that's so cool. And I actually remember thinking, that's so cool. And they gave us lollipops and we walked to the car. And I got in the car and I looked at my parents. I said, that's utter. I didn't use this word because I was 5. But I remember thinking, that doesn't work. That can't actually happen. That's just not right. And quizzing them for hours. How did they turn books into lollipops? I don't buy it. So that was the first conscious thought of looking at numbers, looking at abstract ideas and going, how does this work? The second time I really learned that was when I was skiing. And I skied on the US ski team. I was 13 when I joined the team. And I worked for Nordica. I skied for Nordica back when we were actually amateurs. And so I told Nordica, I need you to make a boot for me. I use my ankles when I ski. It's my secret sauce. And I want you to make a floating cuff. And so they said, come down to the design studio and we'll do that. Remember now I'm like 14 years old and I'm like, okay, that sounds cool. So I go down, I talk to the designers and I'm telling them what I want and why I want it and how I want it. And they're like, I'm going, are you okay with doing this? You're going to design a whole ski boot for me? That's so cool. And they said, well, yeah, we're going to do that because we can just say designed by a US ski team member. And I'm like, oh, that's amazing. I'm like, but isn't that expensive? And they said, no, that ski boot costs us 16 cents to make. And I was like, what? 16 cents? How's that possible? And they're like, well, the inner liner is $2. But so it's $2.16 for a ski boot. And I'm like, but you sell it for like $450. It's really expensive. And they're like, yep. And I was thinking, okay, this doesn't work. So that was my path to learning finance. I looked at accounting. That didn't interest me. It was very boring. And we'll get to why in a minute. And so I went through Dartmouth, Harvard, and then went through a bank training program to get credit. And then I went to work for one of my developers, and he developed big acreages with single family homes. And I did the financing for all of his homes and helped him get the design done. He did the building, but he gave me the corners. And so I developed retail. So here's one of my retail shopping centers. Well, it's not really an actual one, but
Deb,
so
I'm gonna ask you a quick question, okay?
Yeah.
Just because for anyone who isn't familiar with when you say that you kind of finance the whole thing, can you just explain exactly what that means to give some context? Because most of our clients obviously aren't people who are doing these massive deals and these projects. They're self-funded businesses, bootstrapped just with their knowledge. So it's obviously a very different business model. So can you just kind of give some context as to what exactly you mean by that?
Absolutely. This is just sort of background. We'll get to the self-funding in a minute. So when I could contacts with banks, I knew how to put together the loan request and give them all the information that they needed to finance these multiple $1 million projects. Most of my shopping center projects were I don't know, anywhere from $8 to $10 million in construction lending. And so you had to find banks that would do that. In Texas, most banks were not branch banks. We had individual banks. So you had to go to several different banks to find a bank that would be interested in financing the project. And then you'd have to raise the equity to put in the project, because they're not going to give you 100% financing. So it's a fairly complex process. And so I helped him with that. And my reward was owning the land that I could then build my shopping centers on. So that was the process. But what happened in the late 80s is all the banks went under in Texas. And so all of them called their loans. When the banks went under, they called their loans. And I was sitting on an $80 million portfolio of real estate that actually was cash flowing if you put it all together, but individual properties weren't necessarily cash flowing. And so it was a big learning lesson in working through with banks, working on cash flow, understanding how to get the most dollars out of, how to get the most money out of successful operations, and how to be very careful about expenses and spending and managing that process. So that was a very good learning experience. And when I was done, we sold all the properties. All my properties ended up rolling into one portfolio. So one bank had my entire portfolio, and I could tell them, hey, it all cash flows if you put them together. And I got them paid off. I was one of 2 developers in all of Texas that actually made all the payments. And that's when we got on the sailboat and left town. It was like, I am done. I'm never going to work again. I'm never going to guarantee a loan again. I am happy as a clam. I'm out of here. And there I am. We're off of Honduras. And then a friend called and said, but there's this resort in Vermont that's for sale, and it's really not very expensive. And that would combine everything you've done, real estate and operations and government, and understanding how to work together. And so I bought this resort out of bankruptcy, thinking this is going to be the culmination of everything I've done. And this is the base lodge that I built. The second year we had the ski area open. Christmas week, which is 35% of our revenues, I was standing on the top of this mountain, and it is absolutely pouring rain. The sky is crying. I'm crying. My mountain's crying because I spent $2 million making snow, and it's running down in rivers. And I just thought, I'm going to be bankrupt. And that didn't happen because, what do they say? Necessity is the mother of invention. I was standing on the top of the mountain realizing that there were 50 other entrepreneurs who lived in this valley, and all of our guests who were at our resort went home. It's raining. They could all go home because they lived in Connecticut and Vermont and New York and New Jersey, and they just got in the cars and went home. But the other resorts, the one north of us that was a big New York Stock Exchange company owned company, they kept all their guests because the guests had prepaid packages, and they'd already paid for it. They were going to stay. They were going to see what other activities could happen. And so I went, that's what we have to do. So I created a marketing cooperative with all the other entrepreneurs, and we created our own packages. And so we were able to have the same kinds of results that the big New York Stock Exchange companies were. And so I talked everybody into this, and my bed and breakfasts and my restaurants and, ski rental places, they all signed up, and then they all came over to my office building and said, I have no idea what you're talking about. I don't know what a price point is. I don't know what a margin is. I have no idea what I've signed up for, but I'm on board. And I realized that now I had to educate 50 business owners as well as run my resort. So that is the genesis of Bomba, and that's what I've been doing ever since. Because when I was standing on the top of a mountain, I made a promise that if I got through it, I would continue to teach people not to do all the stupid things that I've done. So that's how I got here. When we sold the resort, I went back into banking. I took a couple of years off and then went back into banking because I am really bad at retiring. So that is the story. I spent 20 years in banking, and now I've retired, and I live half the time in Dallas working, and that's where my family is. And then the other half of the year, 7 months of the year, I spend on my sailboat traveling. And I can do my business on my sailboat because I have a nice little satellite, and I work while I'm on the boat, and then I take 3 days a week, and the rest of the time we're traveling. So that's the story. So let's talk about how you set up finances and how do you look at your numbers. So I'm assuming that everybody here has some kind of accounting software, and that software uses GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles. There's also, in other countries, there are the same kinds of concerns. And accountants take your transactions and put them into your GL. Now, if you don't have a formal accounting software, you're using Excel or Google Docs, you're still going to put your revenue and then your expenses together. But what I'm going to show you is how to do that so that you get information about the profitability of running your business and how to make decisions. So this guy, I'm sick and tired of generally accepted accounting principles. I can't tell you if this is an accountant or this is a business owner, but they're horrible rules that really don't help you understand how to run your business. But it's what your tax guy uses, it's what your CPA uses, it's what your bookkeeper uses in your accounting software, but it doesn't help you understand how to run the business. So accounting is, as I said, about posting transactions, what's happened in your business, it's history. We take your actual numbers and we put them in your GL accounts. Very detail oriented. What we want to do is finance. Finance is where you interpret those results and you say, okay, how do we understand what we did and what we're going to do? How do we make decisions using this information? So we look at trends, we look at margins, and that's how we improve the profitability, especially when you're growing, because growing a company takes a lot of capital and you have to use the resources that you have very wisely. So what separates the expert from a normal accountant is the ability to make simple things utterly incomprehensible. But what we're going to do here is we're going to make it simple. So if you're using an accounting software, or if you're working with a bookkeeper or an accountant, I'm seeing a lot of mistakes. So you want to make sure that your chart of accounts are set up completely correctly. You want to make sure that you're using either a cash or an accrual system, not a little bit of both, which I've seen a lot of. Double booking entries into your accounting software is a huge problem. And this one, not recognizing revenue correctly, is something that I see coaches that we really want to focus and talk about. And not relieving AR inventory. So that means, you have an accounts receivable on your books, and you leave it there, but even though you've collected the cash, but not recognizing revenue correctly. This is a big problem for companies that collect money up front. So if you have a client and you're charging them $10,000 and that's a 6-month program, technically you haven't earned that $10,000. You only are going to earn it every month for 6 months. So if you're taking that all in as cash, you still owe that client, the business. So in the US, I think it's the same in Europe numbers as well, that is not recognizable as income yet, even though you have the cash. So that creates problems in a number of industries, and coaching is one of them. Okay, so what do? How do you put this income statement together if GAAP is not helping you and your QuickBooks are not helping you? Can we find out, can you learn how many people do have a QuickBooks or a Xero or a Sage or NetSuite type accounting system?
You guys using that? Can you just type me into the chat and let's see how many people have? I know that's what we use. So one of those things.
Which one of those?
QuickBooks. We're using QuickBooks right now. I had a private accountant doing it. I think they were using Xero, and then they would give reports before.
Yes.
But all the problems that you have just mentioned, totally I can resonate with, because I have to say personally for me, the only times I feel like a real idiot, like a stupid person, is when I'm speaking to either a lawyer or an accountant, because they just ask questions. I just don't even know how to answer these questions. And I'm like, guys, I'm trying to tell you, like, this is not how much money we've made. You're giving me all these wrong numbers and I can't make business decisions based upon what you're telling me here. They're like, but Lauren, this is what we need to go by for the books. And I'm like, okay, sure. So we've got some messages coming through here. Christian said I have, but I don't personally use it. Yoni says it's made for accountants, not normal people.
Yes.
Like SAP on steroids. Chrissy says I don't know what our accountants use. That's quite common in the UK, where actually you don't log in yourself. I've noticed though in the US, the actual business owner tends to log into this software a bit more often. So it's pretty different as far as what I've seen. So hopefully that helps.
Yes, that's very helpful, because what I want Absolutely, that's what we're seeing across the board, regardless of where you are. And if you start getting those financial statements from your bookkeeper, or from your CPA, or whoever does it on a monthly basis, what I'm going to have you do is what we're going to talk about today to make those things something that you can actually use and work with. And here's why. This is the chart that kills all of my clients. And I think it's probably a little better in the coaching industry, but this is a big shocker. This is a whale chart because it looks like a whale, as you can see, and this was published in the Harvard Business Review about 30 years ago. I haven't seen it since, but every one of my clients falls onto this chart. And what it is, the blue dots, there are 20 clients here, the top 20 customers, which is usually about 80 or 90% of your business. And the blue dots are the individual profitability of each of those clients. And then the pink dots are cumulative. So if you look at the tail of the whale, it looks like they're having a good year because it's very profitable, 40%. But if you look at these individuals, 20% of the clients, 4 out of the 20 clients are not profitable. So that's horrible. So an easy way to improve profits is to get rid of those 4 or to change how you're pricing your product. The top 5, those are very profitable, and that's what's driving business. But here's the scary part. Half of them, more than half of them, are break even. And so that's the easy place to move the needle. And the thing that kills me is I thought this was a ridiculous chart, but I've now been working with hundreds of business owners, and 95% of them fall into this chart. And so it's really easy to make changes. Now, in the coaching profession, what I have found myself personally is when my clients fall into this break even, it's because I'm spending too much time with them. I haven't defined well enough what my role is and what they're supposed to do, because in my coaching practice, I want to be training them to do what I do. So I'm not doing their numbers. I'm training them how to do and how to look at these numbers in a way that helps them make business decisions. So when I'm doing that, I'm not spending my time as wisely. That's when they fall off the chart and are not as profitable as they should be for me.
Deb, if we can just go back to that for a second, the whale chart. I love this concept. And I think this is where the ICP, the ideal client profile, is a really important thing to pay attention to, because you will typically find that the clients who are outside of the ICP, while you may be able to get results for them, they take more time and they take more effort. So whenever we're looking at ICP, we have like 3 avatars. And then there's like the A-star player kind of avatar, which are the ones who actually require the least work from us. We barely even have to do anything. They don't even really come to any of the calls. They don't even like schedule their one-on-one sessions. They just implement like a couple of the things that we advise them to do, and they get outsized returns because, like, for us, for example, it's people that come to us with already an existing audience, right, that they can tap into, and they already have like some type of offer, and they just need to use a couple things from us and they get outsized returns. The second avatar that we have is more of like what I would say falls into like that middle kind of break even. However, the way that they become profitable is through sending referrals, and because those guys stay with us for a long time. So maybe it takes like a few more months for them to become the profitable customers. But then you look at the unprofitable ones, and these are the actually the non-ICPs. And this is where you have to fire your clients. At least that's what I would say, or create a really hands-off container for them, which can become a good point, once you kind of reach the $1 million per year mark in the coaching business. But would you say that that's an accurate assessment? And what else would you add?
Absolutely. That is absolutely the same groups of clients that I see myself in my coaching business, but also across the board with my clients.
Yeah. So it's like,
yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, is it just a case of, potentially getting rid of some product lines, some programs that you're selling, some type of clients that you're serving? And also when it comes to those super profitable clients, if you're noticing there's a lot of them and they're the best clients and they have the same characteristics, maybe it comes down to creating a container specific to them, which is potentially even more higher priced.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. And different clients are going to choose different paths to that place. One of the things that you mentioned about firing clients, I have tried. Firing clients is I don't mind firing them. And when they're not profitable or they're not following recommendations and then complaining that they're not being successful. A lot of my business clients will like double the price, and sometimes the client will leave, and sometimes they stay and they're like, it's worth spending the time on it. I do not find that to be the case with my coaching clients. There's no amount of money you can pay me to put up with somebody that's not going to take your advice or not going to follow the rules and then complain about it. So that's just my personal opinion.
Well, it's because you have a close relationship with them in coaching. Even if you have a team of coaches, you still have to speak to them and show up. And even if you have coaches, though, if that type of client is a drain on your resources, and every time your team has to speak to that person, they come off the call feeling drained and exhausted, or you have to chase them to get them to do the thing, then it's just not a super good use of your time, because as a coaching business, your time is best spent on those clients that actually want the result. So I hear what you're saying 100%. And yeah, like, one time I heard this phrase, and it was called aggravation fee. And so for those clients who are the ones who don't really show up, you maybe double the price for them. And if they want to stay, then they're getting that higher price point just because they're, because they're an aggravation to serve. We've done that before when we've done one-on-one coaching, and it does work and it does make sense because they do take more time. So it's just like charging by the hour,
Yeah. I just, life's too short. I've learned if you start there just and you don't feel like you're going to get progress, it's better to recommend somebody else than to waste your time. But that's just my opinion, and I'm in a position where I can say that. So so this is what a QuickBooks type financial looks like. This is one of my clients. They have pages of them, 12 pages. And so what we're going to do is simplify it. Whoops, I'm going the wrong way. Okay, so we're going to turn a whole bunch of lines, a whole bunch of expenses into 12 categories. And the income statement I'm focusing on because this is where the action is in your business. This is where revenue comes in and expenses go out. It's over time, and we're going to look at those expenses because this is where your profitability is. So first, we're going to look at your revenue drivers, and then we're going to look at your expenses. And this is how we're going to do it. This is your BFF, your Bomba Financial Framework. And we have 4 categories we're going to put your numbers in. We're going to look at your revenues and the different product markets, or the different line items, the different categories, programs you sell, and what are the different drivers of revenue. Then we're going to look at your variable costs, and I'll get into these in a minute, and then your fixed costs, and then your OIBDA costs. Everyone agrees on the numbers, but no one knows what they mean. That is exactly how people look at these accounting. And the accounting software is set up for accountants, so they can see every kind of company looks the same, regardless of what the industry is. And it's so accountants can do their job. It is not for people trying to run their business. So what we're going to do is we're going to make these very same numbers give us information. So here's what we're going to do. The first group is, as I said, your drivers. The second group are your variable costs. These are the costs that vary with your sales. Okay, so your sales are going up. You're going to have to add more coaches. You're going to have to add more people to take incoming calls. You're going to have to add more people to do the process of onboarding clients. These are variable costs. If sales slow down, those are the people you're going to let go, or those are the costs that you're going to cut. So anything that moves with revenue, the people who work in this variable space are usually I forgot what I was going to say. The ones in the variable space are usually the ones that will be working with your clients and working externally, working producing the product that you are for the clients that you're serving. Now,
Yeah, that makes sense.
The fixed expenses, these are the expenses of running your company. And what I find is that people don't include these in their brains when they're talking about pricing products. They know what those variable costs are. They know they have these 3 people to cover, or these 5 people, or they know what these costs are on the variable side, but they forget they're spending money. They're paying accountants and lawyers, and they're paying for programs, and they're paying the platforms and all of these costs to run the business, they're fixed. They don't change. It doesn't matter if you're making $500,000 or 750,000 or $1 million, they're going to be the same. Now they reduce as a percentage of your revenue. As your revenue increases, they'll come down dramatically because you're able to use that capacity to do more business. So understanding the difference between your variable and your fixed cost is a game changer, and you're going to see how that works. And then the fourth category of expenses are the things that you're using to capitalize your business. So if you're borrowing money, the interest that you're paying is below the line. And I say below the operating profit line. That's what we usually look at. It's EBITDA. And I like to have people think about, if you were selling your business, would the new owner need to pay these costs? And the answer is no. If they're buying your company, they may borrow more money than you, but that's not going to change the amount of money that your company is throwing off. Not going to change your operating profit. So the below the line numbers are the ones that are one-time fees, capital costs like borrowing money, your taxes. If you borrow a lot of money, you're going to reduce your income, and then you're going to have less taxes. But taxes, therefore, are dependent on what your capital structure is. So these are the things that are below the operating line. Now, the last part of it I call owner's benefits. So you're going to see, like if you're giving donations, that's something that another owner might not do. Or like I hired my kids when they were in high school to work at my resort, and I paid them exorbitant amounts of money so they would have money for college. So those went below the line, because obviously if another business owner wanted to do that, that's not my problem, but that was not going to impact the operating profit. And you obviously want your operating profit to be as high as you can so you can sell for a higher multiple. So those are the four categories. And what happens with accountants is they don't know which of your worker bees are variable and which are fixed. You don't want them to, because that's going to change. They don't necessarily know where those fixed and variable costs are. They do know what your EBITDA costs are, but that's really not a relevant number for them, because they don't care what you're going to sell the business for. So putting your numbers into these kinds of categories will really help you understand where your costs are. And I am going to show you, oops, the wrong one. So here is, here, I'm opening the kimono because I don't have, to Lauren's point, my ICP is not coaches. So I'm like, well, where am I going to find coaching financials? And I'm like, well, I guess I have some. So, so here's what it looks like over here at my desk. And as I said, I retired from banking in 22. So this is like half a year of full-time working. And then 23 was my first full-time year of working. And so I just want to outline how this works in my business, and hopefully there'll be some parallels. So I have 4 programs that I'm working on. So you can see my top is my revenue drivers. And in 22, I had one mastermind group that I started in the beginning of the year. And then I started doing some one-on-ones. Now, for me, one-on-ones are pretty easy to get, but they really helped me learn sort of how to refine what I wanted to do. And then I had some other income streams. Oops, goodness me. I don't know how that got stuck in there. And so this is what my drivers look like in 22. In 23, as I said earlier, I started a community, which I thought would be a great driver to my mastermind groups. Well, that was a complete failure. I've spent more time in the impact group than I have in the impact school than I have in my Obama community. So I definitely that was a bad idea at this stage in my business, but it's there and it throws off some money. My mastermind groups is really where I want to focus. These are groups of 10, and we go through a 1-year program. And so, and then I after learning something about a higher end number, I started a quick start program, which is just an 8-week program. It's 6 weeks of financials, and it's for higher revenue clients that just want to do numbers. and then my one-on-ones. So these are my drivers. Okay. And what I look at is, so here's my revenue last year, and then here is the percentage of revenue. So when I look at my growth, which was a lot of growth, obviously 57%. When I look at my growth from 22 to 23, okay, I want this to be a higher percentage, and it really wasn't a higher percentage. So I really needed to focus on mastermind groups, and that's why I joined Lauren's Impact School. But I want to reduce my reliance on one-on-ones and push my sales into these groups, which is obviously exactly the goal here that Lauren's teaching us. So that's the important part for me. And then I look at these monthly. Now, as opposed, I charge my clients monthly. I match my revenues with my expenses so I can see how these work, and I know that I'm making a profit. And I watch that every month. And you're going to see, I'll show you the cash flows. But so I like to know what I'm making every month. And then as I go through this, you're going to see I match the amount of time that I'm spending on it. So I actually hit that E in economics when I saw that when we learned about that a while back. I'm like, oh yeah, I do this every day. Well, not every day, but every month. So we were definitely simpatico in terms of thinking about the value of your time and how you're using it. So these are the revenues. These are the drivers that I'm monitoring. And so I'm watching how they're doing month over month and then year over year. Now, my variable expenses, I have analysts, I have financial analysts that work with me on with my clients. So I'm not doing all of the number crunching. When I'm working through these kinds of numbers, we take their financial statements, we put them into this format, we talk to them about where some of these expenses will go. I let my analysts handle a lot of that. I do some of it because that helps me have better conversations with my clients because I know what was going on. But I have coaches or financial analysts that do a lot of the number crunching for me initially. And then I've called this coaching. My second line item is really, I'm still learning how to do this marketing stuff. And so I have a number of people that I've hired to go, okay, how do I do this? How does this work? Should I do a blog? So it's a cost but it's variable. I can cut them off at any time and I plan on it. But then I also think, okay, but this is where I can now be spending money on on ads once I decide I'm going to put ads, or if I decide I'm going to put ads. So I really wanted a good placekeeper because ads are definitely a variable cost. If we're going to put Google ads out there, I can decide, hey, I don't have enough clients, or I want to grow my audience. Let's put some ads out and see if we can attract something, and then I can reduce it. So that's definitely a variable cost. So those are the variable costs in my business. And so that's about 20% of my revenue. But it's probably a lot more than that because my fixed costs include a full-time employee and my VA. And my full-time employee is my daughter. So even though she's probably a variable cost, because what she does is she does my email marketing and she does a lot of my correspondence, she should probably be a variable cost, because if things slow down, I would get rid of her, but she's my daughter, so I don't think I can get rid of her. And I say she is a full-time employee. She's a W-2 in the US world, but she doesn't work for me full-time. Her passion is working with families who have autistic children. She's a behavioral therapist, but that doesn't pay her very well. So this is her job that keeps her clothed and fed and her family in their place. So she's a full-time employee, and I have her under fixed costs because I'm not going to let her go. And this is usually where we have the coach's full-time salary. So this is where your salary would go. And so you're not going to let go. This is what you expect to pay yourself. And so your fixed costs will be down here, your salary. Platforms and office expenses, rent, I pay her homeowner's dues because she uses her homeowner's conference room for meetings, and other expenses. So normally your fixed costs will not run to 50%. Now, if you have your salary in there, it could, because that's an adjustable number. You know, if you want to bring it up real high and be a S corp in the United States, That's a better tax advantage right now than having an LLC. And so there's some things to play with there. But normally what we would see is this 30% would be up here in the variable cost. So 50% on variable costs and 20% down here in fixed costs. But it doesn't really matter what the norm is. What you're going to want to watch is year over year, month over month, quarter over quarter. You're going to want to see that as your revenue goes up, as the revenue goes from 147 to 231, you're going to see your cost, your cost of goods, your variable costs go down as a percentage, as it has, so that your gross income goes up as a percentage. It goes up as a number and as a percentage. And the same thing on your fixed costs. It's going to come down because your fixed costs are not going to change dramatically. And then the EBITDA costs really are not something that you work on, you worry about. I look at them because a lot of my companies, if you wanted to go out and buy a coaching practice or buy a platform that you could use, you might want to, you would incur an expense. But most coaches don't have a lot of borrowings. There's not a whole lot of reason to borrow except to bridge some of the financial gaps that you might want to do with a line of credit. There's not a whole lot of depreciation or amortization unless you do make an acquisition of a company. So there's not a whole lot of information that you need to worry about on this last category, this EBITDA expense category. Okay, so because I charge monthly, I look at my statistics on a monthly basis and make sure that I'm in line with my numbers. Now, the reason I have the red numbers is that those were not on a 12-month basis. Normally, you just look at the fiscal year 23 and you divide it by 12, and that's how much you made each month on average. But because the community just got started in 6 months and my Quick Start program was only 3 months, I looked at how those were doing on a monthly basis. So last year, I did about $23,000 a month, and I netted about $9,500 a month, which wasn't a bad place to start. Now, what does that all mean? So I used that then to build a budget. Are there any questions? That was a lot of information.
Yeah, if we go back, I have a couple questions and then I'll jump to the ones from the chat. So when we're looking at the, I think you called it OBRA, the expenses,
Yep.
like the owner's benefits, right? So one of the things, and I actually spoke with my accountant about this because I do a lot of personal expenses through my business.
Yep.
And the reason being is just because, you know, it just makes sense. And based upon my lifestyle, it is, well, I'm not actually having taxable reasons, but it just makes sense. Just, you know, because when you're putting a lot of stuff on social media, it can be classified as a business expense. Anyways, the thing that I was asking them about was add backs. Because obviously if somebody else was running this business, that would not be a expense of the company. So is what you put down here as owner's benefit, is that the same as an add back? Just to make sure.
Absolutely. And so one of the reasons that you would have this separate financial statement that you're running, you're not going to change anything that your accountants do. You're just going to have a separate financial statement so you can keep track of it. So if you sold your business, you could go, here are all my add backs. And you have tracked them. You have a monthly statement that tracks them so that it's easy to give evidence to the person who buys it. Oh, here's all the expenses that she incurred that are added back. We just move them all below that operating line item. But we don't necessarily want to explain what we did to our accountants. I mean, my accountant doesn't know that my daughter made $60,000 being a cart girl. And when she was gone, when she was not there, a cart girl I didn't even have to pay money to because they lived on tips because they're serving alcohol to golfers, you know, 12 hours a day. So those are numbers that you don't necessarily want to say to your accountant, but if you're going to go turn around and sell the business, absolutely.
Awesome. So the next question that comes from that is regarding these Bomba financials. So Manshi asked, do you create the Bomba format manually from your bookkeeping?
Yes, that's it. Actually, I'm glad that you mentioned that. So what I do is the total revenue, not number. Usually from the bookkeeping, it's just a number. Like all of these are on Stripe. Most of them are on Stripe. And so, I separate them out and I look at those stripe numbers. But yes, I absolutely separate them out and put them on this format. And then I always make sure that my net income, the number at the bottom, is the same every month from my financials. But then I rearrange all the line items. I look at my, obviously, I only have one full-time employee, but I look at all of my expenses and I put them into these categories so
Okay,
that my numbers match every month.
that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And it will be interesting as well when our clients do this to see, you might actually think you're making a lot from one program that you have when you realize a lot of your revenue is coming from something else. And then it's just an easy decision just to kill that thing. So
Absolutely, that happens all the time. And seeing where the growth is, and you're focusing on the growth of something and it has an impact. I mean, I was focusing on masterminds and I kept getting one-on-ones, and I'm like, I got to stop this. This isn't really what I want to do.
yeah.
But then I hired some people. I'm like, well, maybe I could do some more. So it's a great way to manage what's going on that you haven't noticed.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I appreciate you lifting the curtain on your financials because it's really, really valuable for everyone here. So respect for you on that side of things. And I was going to ask one final question, which is, when it comes to salaries, I'll put my hands up and make an admission. Like for years, like literally up until last year, I didn't pay myself a salary. Not at all. So I would always do that thing where, I pay my team. I make sure no matter what, my team's getting paid. And then I would just kind of be like, yeah, well, it's okay. We've made a profit. So like, I don't need to worry about a salary because there's a pot of money there. And if I want some money, I can just take it. It's my business. And then I realized like, I'm creating so much unnecessary stress for myself. Because as soon as I started paying myself a salary and I'd see it coming out and it be on the expenses list of my business every single month, which we show our entire team, we have a monthly all hands where we show everyone the finances every month. I felt so much relief because then my team could also see a realistic profit figure and how much we're actually spending. And it just helps everyone kind of come together. But I didn't really know how much to pay myself. I had no idea. So I just kind of pulled a number out of thin air. But how it was like for me, it was just basically what do I want? What's comfortable for me? And what can the company actually realistically do? So that's how I came up with my salary. But what would you advise when it comes to figuring out the salary that one should pay oneself as the business owner?
Yes. So there are a whole lot of theories around that. I recommend exactly what you did. What's a number that, will support you and keep you comfortable and live the lifestyle that you want, that you're going to generate every month? I mean, that number may not be one that everyone can generate every month, but that's the best way to start. And then the second way is really if you decided, I've had it, I don't want to do this for a year, but I want to come back. A lot of people, when we were sailing, a lot of people took the year off and someone else ran their company and then they went back to work. So if someone else was going to do that job, what would you pay them? And so you can get a comprehensive salary, numbers together from consultants or people that do that for a living, and this is what you could pay them. Or you could find it, you could call someone that you thought could do what you do, at least maintain it, and say, hey, if you come work for me, I'll pay you 250 grand or whatever that number is. So that's the other way, is you want to be paying yourself market. I have a lot of clients though that pay themselves in the US. The top number, you couldn't pay yourself more than $600,000 a year as a salary. I know that's moved. That was several years ago, but there was a limit on the top number. And right now in the US, we're seeing a lot of people taking their LLCs and moving them into S corporations because the taxes that you pay on a salary is a lot less than what you pay on your profits. And so we're seeing that happening, but I don't know what the impact is in other countries.
Yeah, it varies country to country, doesn't it? Because, for example, in the UK, they have more of like a sliding scale when it comes to income. I know they have that in other places in Europe, and I believe Australia as well. In Australia, it's something ridiculous. Like if you pay yourself over a certain amount, you're paying like, I think it's more than half of that salary and taxes. So that's where it comes down to knowing, the country where you are a resident, getting clarity on what's the actual, rules around taxes there, because you don't want to be paying more than you need to. And also getting clear on when it comes down to company structure, obviously once you get to a certain level, you know, below sort of 500, 750K per year, it's probably, you don't necessarily need to spend an awful amount of time doing different tax structures. But
Yes.
once you get to that kind of $1 million per year level, you might actually consider looking into different structures to have a more efficient way of running your business, maybe out of a different jurisdiction, if it makes sense for you, because then you can benefit from obviously tax reductions on that side of things.
Absolutely. And the other thing that I recommend to my clients is, you know, once they put a salary in there, and as you said, you know, it's just a relief to know they're going to be paid, they're part of the structure. Um, the bottom line, that bottom line in the US, I always recommend you divide it in thirds. A third goes to taxes, the third stays in the company so you can leverage and build the company with the capital that you've had. And a third goes into a wealth building tool, whatever that is, so that you're building your wealth at the same time you're building your company, because so many people leave all their money in the company, and then something like COVID happens. In the US, you know, the government rescued us, but a lot of people would have lost everything. And they haven't put something aside. So that's one problem that we run into. The other problem is they take everything else because their tax advisor tells them, take all your money out of your company, and then you don't have the capital to grow. And so there's sort of a, in this case, you can split the baby and make sure that you're growing your company at the same time, because if you leave everything in there and then you think you're going to sell it for some big dollars, and you don't, because that's a market that has the same kinds of fluctuations that other economies have, you may not hit that market right, or it may be out of favor. And so you don't want to just wait for a big payday at the end. You want to build. And so you've got a salary that you're going to take out that gives you your lifestyle. And then what's in the bottom, you want to take out at the end. You want to put some of that aside and build wealth at the same time you're building your company. And I know you have someone in here who you know, builds foundations for clients that are doing really well, and that's a great tax structure. So
awesome.
So it's not like it doesn't go in your pocket at the very end. If you're taking a salary, you still have to make a decision about the profits that you make.
Love it. Yeah, no, totally. And that's also something that I see oftentimes is, because they're not paying themselves a salary, then reinvesting back into the business feels really, really scary. And so this can actually allow you to budget better when it comes to your financials inside of your business. Deb, before we move on, speaking of which, budgeting to reinvest back into the business, like how do you have kind of a framework for that? How do you think about that typically? You mentioned earlier about sort of reinvesting back into ads, if that's something that you choose to do. So obviously, once you've got really great financials with this process, then you have the freedom to be able to make strategic decisions on how you're going to redeploy the funds that you've made. So go ahead.
That's my next slide.
Okay. You're one step ahead of me. So let's get to it.
Okay, so here's my budget for 24. And Lauren, you're absolutely correct. Everyone should be looking at their budget. If you're growing very fast, you should look at it every 6 months, because budgeting is the best way to think about your company strategically. And you're not going to get it right. So, you know, this whole concept of right and wrong, a budget you're never going to get right, but you're going to get better and better at looking at how you're going to deploy capital and how you're going to deploy your resources when you start thinking in terms of what's going to happen next month. What am I going to do next year? What am I going to focus on? And I love the 8 weeks, because I use quarters because I'm a financial person, but that's a really good structure to think about what can I accomplish in this period of time. So here's my budget for this year. And we're in February and I'm behind, which, you know, no one likes to be behind budget. But so I really did exactly what you just said. I said, okay, here's my budget. Here's my community. I want to have 70 paying participants in my community by the end of the year. And that was way below the number that I started with a year ago, because I learned I'm not focusing on it. It's a byproduct of what I'm doing. And I'm only going to get 50% of them for the whole year. So if I get to 70 at the end of the year, I'll only have had revenue from 50 of them. So that's my budget. It's not a very big number, but I hope to grow it as my company matures. My mastermind groups, I'm going to go from 2 to 4. But again, I'm not going to get them all in the first month. So I said 70% of the revenue will come in during the year. So that's 4 mastermind groups. So I've got one started in January. We're going to work on this one for the March, April offer. And then maybe one more before summer, but definitely one in October, November, maybe September, October, 2 more, 1 more. I don't know, but that's the push. And again, I think on the last slide I showed you, I'm charging $500 to $750 per client per month. And so as they start to fill, I'll be able to push up that purchase price. So right now I'm charging $500 a month, and I'm hoping that in the fall I'll be charging $750. I do have some people paying $750. A quick start program every other month, and then my one-on-ones, just really sticking to what I'm doing, bump the price a little bit. So this is the budget that I have for the year. And you can see my goal of having my masterminds be my major source of income still isn't up there. I'm not there yet. I'm not where I want to be. I want one-on-ones to be less of a driver, and my mastermind groups to be more of a driver. So I'm really working on how to bring in those clients, and I haven't figured it out yet, but I know we're going to get there. But so this is giving me $30,000 a month. So I went from 19 to 30. So that's a pretty significant bump. Now, my coaching, I have 3 people that I pay $125 an hour to do the analysis. And I have 3. I'm not paying just one because I want to be able to, I'm building a bench. I want to be able to hand them off when they have time. And so it's strategic not to have just one person doing it. I want to have more so that as I grow, they have more capacity to grow with me. And then my coaching hopefully will slow down on the coaching and paying people to teach me how to do some of the marketing things and increase the marketing spend on ads and things. So I've sort of left those numbers in line, but you can see I've definitely increased the variable costs. I've increased it as a percentage of my revenue so I can accomplish those things. And then my fixed costs, I just increased 7% as a cost of living. None of those are going to change significantly. So as a percentage of my revenue, I went from 29% of operating income to 32%. I went from a 50% number in terms of my fixed costs, 50% of my revenue, down to 33% of my revenue. So those are doing exactly what they're supposed to do because I set it up so that I would have those fixed costs. I knew that I had an infrastructure in place to be able to build on. So that's doing all the things that it's supposed to do. And now I would pocket $10,000 a month. So that makes me happy. That's a good number for me. I mean, I have investments and other things that support me. So, but I want to feel like I'm getting value from working hard.
Yeah.
So this really makes you think about, how am I going to do this? Who am I going to have in place? And what's going to happen? And then you measure against this.
I love it, Deb. This is so cool. So you're essentially budgeting, and you budget in both ways, as in how are you going to deploy the funds and how you're going to make the funds, like your goals for that. So I guess the question then is, business doesn't always go right. You can set a budget, and I see this a lot where people set just a crazy goal. So let's just say last year, your goal let's say last year you hit like 50K from your mastermind, 50K from your one-on-one, and 20K from the community. Let's just do those simple numbers. So I would see people set the goal as, okay, well, last year my total revenue was, what was that, like 120K. So this year I'm going to make $1 million. And so I'm going to have 500K from my mastermind and 400K from my one-on-one and 100K from my community. Like, this is something that we see all the time, is these giant leaps, which are totally unrealistic. Yeah. And sure, there are some unicorn type people who achieve that type of thing. But obviously, if you set your goal to go from like 120K to $1 million, you're pretty much, 9xing your business, which is a huge increase. So how do you do this realistically? How do you do this in a way that actually is achievable and something that you can genuinely achieve?
Yes. And I think that's where you get very granular. Okay. So how did you get the 50,000 from your mastermind groups? What was the process? What was the time frame? So how do you think you can do what's the process that's going to allow you to go from 1 time to 9 times? and you just have to get granular. That's why I have these numbers. This is how I figured it out. This is how I count it. And so if you say, what's that going to take? Can you do that? The answer is obviously not. The reason I put a foundation in place was so I had those pieces in place so I could grow faster on the top and knew I had the resources at the bottom, at the expense side. So I just I have clients that do that all the time, and I just get it granular. So last year, last year I was able to start 2 masterminds. This year I want to start 4. Is that possible? Well, I know what the timing is, and I know what I go through. I went through the perfect for my January group, and I signed up 35% of them. So I had my email marketing campaign. I got 35 responses that I interviewed, and then I 35% of them is my 12 clients. So I know what that conversion looks like. Now the question is, can I do that again? And am I generating enough leads now to have a second mastermind group 2 months later? And I don't know the answer to that, but that's my goal. So if you get very granular about how you accomplish the 120, and then you're going to duplicate that or double that or triple that, then what resources are you bringing to bear to 10 times that? And usually my clients will go, oh, I can't do that. I like the number, but it's not possible. And so you have to build from there. Does that answer the question?
Totally. Yeah, it's great. It's actually putting some thought behind the goal rather than just plucking the goal out of thin air.
Well, and to your point, I mean, I literally fired a client because we put together his budget, and I used all the revenue numbers, and then I put his expense numbers in line, and he was losing money. And I said, well, this doesn't work. Well, I'm not gonna be your coach and have you lose money every year. That's not a sustainable business. And so we'd mess with it, and he'd come back and he'd give me a new budget. It was still losing money. And I was like, look, I can't coach someone who's not planning to make some money. And he got tired of my yelling at him, is what he said. And I was like, well, I'm tired of your not understanding that you can't run a successful business without having a profit, or at least breaking even. So and it was just here in terms of the granularity.
That's awesome. Super helpful. No more questions at this point.
Okay. Well, so then this is, I know you probably didn't read all my notes, but I do exactly what you have said in your economics. So I was like, oh yeah, this is cool. Because then I look at this to the question you had about budgeting. So then I said, okay, so how am I doing? So my 70 participants in my community, I have 2 office hours, or I run a boot camp and I run a round table, 2 hours a week online. So that's 12 hours a month. If I hit this budget, that's $455 an hour for me. So that's pretty good return. So that's why I see the community as being a really great resource for me. It gets more people to understand how to run their numbers. So that is still going to be a priority, just behind setting up my masterminds. Now the masterminds, same thing, 28 hours a month. I have 4 classes. I spend 2 hours with them online, and then I spend 30 minutes with each of them. So that's 28 hours a month. Quick start, 8 hours each one, 8 weeks. And one-on-ones take the most time, because I spend 2 hours with them twice. I spend an hour every other week with them, and I usually have to prepare for an hour before our meetings, because that's a lot of done for you. It's supposed to be done with you, but they don't remember the with stuff till I tell them I'm done doing it. So that's an 84-hour month just with my clients. And so I'm like, okay, that's way more work than I want to do. So here's how I calculate it out. So my analysts do about 40 hours of that 84. So they're doing a lot of the number crunching for my mastermind groups and for my one-on-ones. And so that's 40 less hours that I have to do it. But then I have 8 hours, 2 hours a week to manage my team, and then 3 hours a week to manage my social media, which is obviously an understatement right now, because though you can do it in an hour, it takes me a lot longer than that. But so my hours here on a monthly basis are about 64. So that's 2 8-hour days a week. Or my goal down here, I want to work Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So that's a 7-hour week, which I can do. So that's sort of how I look at how I'm spending my time and what I want to do. So that goes back into my budgeting. Now, as I grow, what I intend to do is spend less time with, with some of my masterminds and having my analysts and my number crunchers spend more time with them. And I have a number of people that want to do that worked for me in the past. So, and then the last piece of that, because I'm collecting this money on a monthly basis, if I actually got full price up front, this is a $636,000 year if I got everything up front. So I know I'm on the right track. That's where I'm headed. And once it's duplicatable, this is what I could do, and it would be a $500,000+ business.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I think when it comes down to what you're doing here, you're really putting a lot of thought into the finances and making decisions based upon data. And simply put, in order to scale the business, that's a necessity, because you can get to a certain level by kind of just like YOLOing and just steamrolling through, making some sales, getting some leads, serving some clients. But to really actually do this in a way where you can feel confident behind the decisions that you're making, that's why I wanted to bring you on and come and talk about this, because my goal in order to achieve what we want is we want to be creating hundreds of $1 million coaching programs. Well, we need our clients to understand economics, and we need our clients to understand numbers, because in order to do this in a strategic way where it's actually really, really sustainable, knowing these numbers is fundamental and super important. So when it comes to questions at this point, I think the primary thing is, how would you go about doing this right now? Obviously, anyone can contact you inside of the Impact School community if they want to be your client. I mean, I think what you're doing is amazing. So I would advise anyone who likes what they see here and who wants to get a grip of their numbers to go ahead and contact Deb inside of the Impact School community. But to go ahead and actually get this done, Deb, what would the steps be? Is it pretty much just repeating back, watching this training again, and building out the spreadsheets?
Well, I have one more piece that'll help you answer that. So you're setting me up perfectly. If everyone's okay with these numbers, I'll show you how I run them. We're going to put together a cash flow model.
Let's do it.
And that's going to build these numbers for you. So it's simply, I recommend you do it weekly. It's dollars coming in and dollars going out. And this is obviously an old slide because most of you will not be sending out invoices. I would guess most everybody's on auto pay, but if they send out invoices, we're going to track them to make sure people are paying you in a timely manner. So what this is it looks like this. The top half is money in and the bottom half is money out. And just because, we've got the kimono open, this is what it looks like this year for me. And so it's weekly. This is dollars coming in weekly from my community. And one of the nice things about having them on auto pay is once I've got a month established, it repeats itself. Okay. Mastermind, same thing. These are the payments that I receive on a monthly basis. And so again, whoops, they're repeating themselves. So it's easy for me to say, the community, I didn't fill out the top line because I have people leaving and people adding. So that's not as granular, but it's also not a big number if you're adding $78. It's not, but I didn't predict it out. My mastermind, one of them started in October, one of them started in January. So that's very predictable until I start one in April. And then I'll know what that looks like for the next couple of months. So that I can predict out for the entire quarter. The quick start, they're coming in. I'm starting to do some of them, but that's I have to do it as they come in. One-on-ones, again, I know exactly who they are, what they are. I've got 2 that I think are probably going to be done with me. So I didn't predict them all the way out through March. But now I know where my money is coming in and I get to see it each week. I do this each week. I reconcile it with my financial statements. I reconcile it with my bank statements. And so I know how much money came in. That's the tricky part, because we know how much money is going out. Okay, so my contractors, my financial analysts, I pay, there are three of them, I pay them $125 a month, and I pay an hour, $125 an hour. And I have three of them that work 5 hours a week. And so I know when they need to be paid. So that's easy to put across the board. My payroll, easy to put across the board. That's my daughter and my VA. Rent, I pay her rent. Recurring vendors, $500 a week. They're up and down. It's a little more or less than that, but that's an average. And then other G&A costs, these are things like a conference I'm going to, and just, lunch and dinner meals with clients. So I just put those in on a weekly basis or every other week. And they're not significant. So then I know cash in, I see how it's coming in. Cash out, most of the cash out is very predictable. So I can see what my bottom line looks like. I can see what the numbers are coming in, and I can estimate, okay, I'm good. And usually when I hit a $15,000 cash in my bank, I'll take 10,000 out and do something with it. So that happens to mirror that $10,000 that I thought I would make every month. So I'm right on track. And so here's the 5 I started with. And you can just see it's adding. The 6th week, the first week of February was, it was a negative number. I just didn't bring in as many dollars that week, but I still was fine. I didn't show that I took any money out because I haven't yet. But on a regular basis, I would each month say, okay, I'm going to take the 10 grand out that I had said in my budget. Mm. So this is a really easy way to track if things are going the way you expect them to, and then it ties right back to your financial statement.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's interesting because for years I actually did this every day, and because I found that if I kept cash top of mind, then I would actually make more money. So you're saying to do it once a week and to reconcile that way. So just take us through kind of like the workflow, like check the bank accounts, check the cards going out. Is it pretty much as simple as that?
Yes. So I recommend, like, the expense side. You can categorize what's recurring. Mm-hmm. That's really easy. So I just put those in. It's sort of scary because if you look at the year, or the quarter, you see a lot of red at the bottom. You're like, yikes. But that's because I put all my expenses in and not all of my revenue. But so expenses are easy, and this other G&A, so that just, I do it, as you can see, I do it every other week. I go, okay, what wasn't in the recurring revenue? What wasn't in the recurring expenses? And I just aggregate that.
Is that because you pay the team every 2 weeks?
Well, these are so the teams up here, the teams on my payroll, I actually pay them weekly.
Got it. Okay.
And the rent is monthly. And then this recurring vendors, this is Google and all of my software packages. Mm-hmm. If I add them all up, all the platforms and the telephone and the TV and the internet, if I add them all up, it's like $1,900 a month. Mm-hmm. And so I just divide that in by 4 weeks.
Got it. That makes sense.
Yeah. And then and then the all other G&A, that's just every 2 weeks I'll go through and go, okay, it was $1,500. So I'm not as penny oriented as I maybe should be, but I have that luxury. So, yeah. So the expense side is pretty easy to predict. And then, where it's more difficult, if you're taking in, you're taking in a $10,000 revenue number, that's a 6-month program, then I do that each month. So mm-hmm. I know it ends. And so I know what the revenue is going to be, rather than just going, okay, I made 10 grand and then having negative weeks. I'm not good at that. So, but the weekly, some of it's very predictable on a weekly basis, and some of it not so much. And that's where you'll see I've filled out through week 8. I filled out through week 8. Cool. At the end of each week, I just go through my Stripe receipts and my bank account. And I use a debit card on my bank account, so everything's in one place.
Totally. Yeah, that's huge. Doing all business expenses from one place and ideally all money coming in one place just saves so much faff.
Yep.
And I was also going to say, like, I think a huge takeaway here is if you're having a client pay up front for a program, spreading it across the duration of that program in your financial reporting that you're doing for your own personal management when it comes down to how you run your business is huge. Like, that is a huge takeaway.
It's so important, because when I leave money sitting on the bottom line and don't say, okay, this is my 10 grand that's going in my pocket, all of a sudden I'm spending it on something. I'm like, oh, I'll go to that conference. And it's like, you don't have time for that. What are you thinking? And it's like, no. So it creates that discipline to understand, okay, I am building enough. Do I want to, start a Google ad campaign? Do I want to do this because now I have this recurring revenue that I can count on?
And it also gives you that confidence, because in some months you may do a launch and you may be in that position where you don't yet have the team and you're not at that revenue level yet, where you have coaches to fulfill on the launch. And that allows you to, instead of thinking, cool, I made 70 grand this month and now I've got clients with me for 6 months, it's instead 70 divided by 6. Let's count it around like 11 or 12K per month. And then you're coming from a more realistic way of thinking, allowing you to make sharper decisions, because that's a big mistake that we see a lot. People having one big month and then having way less the next month because now they're fulfilling on those clients that they've sold to. And obviously that's something that we aim to solve with the scale program. However, if you have the big launch in month 1 and you start with us that same month, it's obviously not going to all happen overnight. Like, we have to build infrastructure, customer concierge, coaches into your business so that eventually you don't have this problem anymore. And so in the short term, especially people who are right now at that earlier stage with having a program where they get paid up front, that is such a great way of doing things.
Yes. And one of the reasons that I haven't completed week 10 or week 9 is that you want to know where that cliff is. If that's a 6-week program and you sold 70 grand and you've got it leveled out and you're doing okay down here on the bottom line, but you have a cliff, you have to do another program. You have to fill that next 6 months. And so you have to pay attention to, okay, well, if that took me 4 weeks and I need to plan for it now, all of a sudden instead of a 6-month program, now you're really looking at, well, I have 4 months to really get this up and running and get everybody comfortable. But then I have to spend the next 8 weeks getting ready to launch the next project or the next class. And so that really gives you a sense of impending doom.
Right.
You have to plan ahead, and you have to know that revenue is going to stop, or you're going to have to start. When do you start promoting the add-on or the upgrade or the next piece of that? So it really gives you a sense of urgency to completing whatever's next.
No, it's huge. And I was actually speaking to someone that used to be a client of ours, and we went our separate ways. And I had this conversation with him, and he told me that he more recently had done a cohort of clients. He collected a lot of revenue within literally just a couple of weeks. He collected more than 70K. But what happened was he'd become so obsessive over the marketing and sales. He then got in and he had to give out almost 80% of that revenue as refunds.
Oh, that's horrible.
And imagine if he'd have gone ahead and spent all of that money. I also know another guy, someone that I met, an Australian guy who he was in a similar spot. He sold a ton. He had to refund a bunch of them. And then he'd already paid out his team and he'd spent money on marketing because he was making decisions based upon cash collected day one rather than spreading it out over the term of which the clients are with them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and once you've been through that cycle a couple of times, I know in my mastermind, if I fill it with 12 people, I'm going to lose 2. Now, I'll let you know with the perfect system, I'll lost 1. So I'm getting better.
That's awesome.
I know. I was like, oh, this isn't a fit. And I'm getting better at knowing, so I don't have to do that. But that's why, the recurring revenue stream, you're going, okay, this is a really good way to check. Am I losing clients? Am I gaining clients? Because sorting through Stripe isn't any fun. But it helps to be able now to go, hey, how come week 4 and week 8 don't match?
Totally. And another thing, I was looking at our books, and these were not done in your style, so I'm definitely going to make sure that we're on top of these, and I will do that myself as well to make sure that it is dialed in, because I think doing it as the business owner is really important. Like, delegating this away is not a good decision. It makes sense to take the time each week to do this yourself. I'll probably have some help building the actual sheets and stuff. However, I will go ahead and do this myself. But I was going to say, one thing that I noticed through looking at this, and I look on a monthly basis right now. I love your concept of looking weekly. I noticed that we were spending thousands each month on payment processing fees.
Yes.
And I was like, what the hell is going on here? So as soon as I noticed that, I'm like, okay, well, this has got to change, because I could literally hire a couple people for this amount of money that we're spending on friggin' processors. So
Yeah.
now we're looking into different ways of running processing, because it's just a total loss of money doing that. So cool. All right, guys, if anyone has a question, type question into the chat. Manshi, I know you had a question, so if you want to go ahead and ask that to Deb, if you
Yes.
unmute yourself, and if anyone else has a question, type question into the chat, and then we can come to you next.
Hi, Deb. Wonderful, really informative presentation. Thank you very much. I really like your concept of looking at the month-to-month, quarter-to-quarter, year-to-year. My question is, are there any differences or nuances to look at if, for example, you're selling to businesses like B2B versus B2C?
So no. And that goes back to the drivers. Okay. So B2B, one of the nice things is that if you've got, like, that's what I do. Most of mine is B2B. And so I have customers who are retailers. And so they can't really say, here are my customers, or it's hard for them to categorize people who walk into their shops. And so, but there is a lot of seasonality to it. So they can look at, in the summer, the ice cream vendor sells a lot more ice cream than they do in Christmas. Okay, so there's seasonality to it. But in terms of selling to consumers versus business, no. It's just it goes back to how you're classifying your drivers. So I have B2B customers who classify them as, like that retailer. She has retail stores, she sells to boutiques, and she sells online. So her drivers are those three channels rather than individual customers. Does that help?
Yeah, so like, for example, if you're a coach and you're looking, sorry, it's my daughter.
No worries.
So if you're a driver, sorry. So like if you're selling to businesses, you're a coach and you're selling training programs to businesses, and they're a little bit more customized or longer lead times.
Yeah.
Your variable costs is more up and down than when you're just doing your own mastermind or one-to-one. So I was just curious. I understand the logic is probably the same, but I was just curious if there is a different touch to it, just because it is a little bit a different beast.
Yeah, I think that goes back to like your CRM and keeping notes, because you want to be able to do your budgeting and to do your planning. You want to know if I'm going to sell this many programs to, my goal, sell 5 programs to 10 different clients, and I've got 8 that I know are really good, which means I'm going to have 6 new ones or 7 new ones. And it takes 3 months to really get in the door and get traction to sell it. Now you can back up and go, okay, so if it takes 3 months and I'm going to sell 6 more, that's 2 a quarter. And that means I need to be doing the following things before I get to actually having a sale. So by having the knowledge of what it is, how long it takes, and what those costs are to get that sale, then you start building that into your budget and you plan for it. And yet it's not going to happen. If you sold 2 in 3 months and then it takes 5 months to sell the next one, and then it takes 2 months, there's always going to be variability to it. But the more you can say, how did I do this last time, and how long did it take, and what did I spend, and when did I do it? Then you start creating. I have the marketing templates to do my mastermind, and I send out a 5 email series, and that resulted in 35 people having an interview, and that resulted in 12 people joining my mastermind. So I have and that's been very consistent. So I know that that's a pretty consistent number for me. Now, I was only doing it once a year. Now last year I did it twice a year. Now I'm going to try to do it 4 times a year. So I imagine that's going to change, and I have to build an audience. We'll see. That's what I'm working on. But you get to know from your experience what worked, and then you get to refine that. Now, lots of times, though I haven't had this experience, lots of times, it took you 6 months the first time you did it, and then it took you 4 months the next time you did it, and then it took you 3 months, because you get better at knowing. It goes back to Lauren's pains and gains. You get better at knowing what those touch points are for your ICPs. And so as you refine it, then you're gonna hit a point where it's gonna go, okay, so I was supposed to get 2 new clients in this quarter, and I got 3, because I'm doing better. I'm having better conversion. So I can reduce some of the upfront costs on my marketing campaigns, because I can't handle more than 2 a quarter. So, or I have to up now my variable costs go up because I have to hire another consultant to handle this business.
Gotcha. That's really helpful. Thank you so much. It makes sense in terms of doing assumptions, but then refining it over time. So you're just getting better at the granular forecasting.
Exactly. And my recommendation when you're doing this is to keep track of what your assumptions were, because I mean, I'm old, obviously, but I go back and I go, what the hell was I thinking when I look at the assumptions? Because once I've learned something that was completely different from what I assumed, I want to keep that information available. So I go, oh, that's why I made that decision, but that's changed. And, none of us have to be reporting our earnings on the New York Stock Exchange. And if we're off by a penny, the whole world changes and you lose 20% of your value. We're not in that game. So if we're getting close, we're doing well.
Great. Thank you.
Deb, this is awesome. I'm so grateful for you. And just on that note, I think it's another reason why we're so bullish on encouraging our clients below, sort of the 750 to $1 million per year to really just try and focus on 1, maybe 2 different products, because the economics does get much more confusing when you start adding different offers. And then obviously the sales cycle changes. And the thing is as well, as you do more posting, as you do more ICP refinement, and as you do more pain gain lists, bringing that back into your marketing, your ICP products, etc., you can even speed up the sales cycle, because I'll share a personal story. So for the longest time, our marketing message was all about scaling high ticket coaching packages. And so we were always talking about that. And it was good. It was great. Like, we generated great revenue with that message. And then one day we posted a story on Instagram, which said, it was something along the lines of, I'm giving away a brand new training today, $1 million audience. It's a blueprint to get sales on social media. Message me results if you want access to it. Something like that. You guys have that template. It's in the social media sales system. And we posted it, and my Instagram story views went up to 4 times how many views we usually get, because so many people replied to it. Because essentially on Instagram right now, how the algorithm works, at least, as of the time of recording this and for the last year, if more people engage and reply to that thing, then it gets put out in front of more people. And it was insane. We had more than 1,000 people register for this workshop just organically from Instagram stories alone within a week. And so we were like, maybe there's some type of message here. So we kept testing that social media angle, and we found that really hit for us. So then we were able to shift the way that we do our marketing, which then sped up the sales cycle. And so if a sales cycle you're finding on average, it's taking you like months and months and months just to close one person, to me, that's not a sales problem. That's a marketing problem. And that's an offer and a positioning and packaging problem. That's not even an economics problem. It's much more down to how are you getting attention and who you're getting it from, and how are you positioning the thing that you're selling. So I just wanted to add that there, because I think sometimes we can look at problems, if we're just looking at numbers, it's Deb, I mean, your background is finance, right? But you've also run your own businesses. And I'm sure you can attest to the fact that sometimes finance people make these crazy models with all these assumptions, and you're like, in the real world, there is 0% chance that this is ever going to happen. So I just like to hear your thoughts about that, Deb, and just get you to piggyback on what I said.
No, that's exactly right. I mean, and the all of the modeling, it's not going to be right. What is the assumptions, and really looking, that's why I love that scale model, because it says, what is causing the problem. And so you're able to identify, as you said, if this is taking months and months, then it's maybe and you're not getting to the offer. Well, then we've got to go back and say, okay, well, let's change what the model is to get us there. And the numbers help you see that there are changes going on that you might not be aware of, but they're not a substitute for actually thinking about what those processes are that are bringing in the clients, or if you're losing clients during the process. So those are they're just going to tell you, if you didn't notice that, my community, I had a big bump and then people just started falling off because there wasn't enough activity. Well, I wasn't paying attention. So all of a sudden it's like, whoa, I was making $6,000 a month and now I'm making $3,000 a month. What happened? So it did call to my attention to it. And then I went, nah, what the hell? Absolutely. I agree 100% with what you said.
Hey, Reza, are you there, by the way?
I'm here. Yeah, I'm here. I'm just having my lunch. I've turned off my camera, but I'm here.
Well, I mean, hey, look, we have the accountant of all accountants in the house. So it's a shame that you missed the presentation, because this was pretty finance heavy, this conversation today. But Reza, I mean, I think it would be interesting maybe to ask you a couple questions and we can have you and Deb maybe battle it out. But obviously you're serving accountants all day long. And so I think it would be helpful to hear from you on your side, like when it comes down to how accountants kind of communicate with their clients to help their clients make better business decisions and like budget and look at their finances, etc. Like, what do you kind of typically see your clients doing that you think maybe they could improve upon to help their clients make better financial decisions? We just had a great masterclass with Deb on this topic. And I think it's one of those things where, we were speaking about earlier, how if an accountant oftentimes gives their client their books, they don't really know what to do decision-wise when it comes to how to reinvest back into their business. So maybe any insight that you have there, and it'll be interesting to hear you and Deb talk about it.
Oh, sure. No, absolutely. Yeah. So I guess my it's all about giving meaning to the numbers, not just about doing the numbers, crunching the numbers, but about creating a story that helps business owners then make better decisions, meaningful decisions off the back of the data that we have now, that we've generated, that we're able to do a lot more efficiently now, given the tools at hand, cloud software, etc. So it's kind of moving away from reporting on history to actually understanding what are the KPIs, what are the leading indicators, the lagging indicators, working out what the the key financial metrics are, the non-financial metrics are, and creating a customized dashboard, specific to that particular client, that then allows them to kind of see their business in numbers and actually make meaningful decisions. So just bring the numbers to life, really, and not just reporting on history, which is no good to anyone, really.
Awesome. Yeah, Deb's just done a great presentation on that. Deb, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's just funny because I completely agree with you, but it's very seldom that I find an accountant who wants to do that. They just want to crunch the numbers, stick them in the model, and then send them to the business owner. But now, as you said, because there's so many tools to do that, the accounting community is starting to invade the financing community and give that kind of advice and build those kinds of dashboards and talk about the story. So I love that. I don't have enough accountants in my neck of the woods to recommend to my clients to help them do that. So that's good to hear that maybe that's we're heading in that direction.
Yeah, it's certainly happening. There's been a revolution. There's quite a few accountants now that are doing it. Hopefully more so. Send them my way. I'll sort them out.
Okay.
It sounds like there's a collaboration waiting to happen here. Deb, I just want to say, can't thank you enough. This was an incredible presentation. We're going to make sure this gets into the portal. Sorry, go ahead.
And I'm happy to send you my worksheets, my
awesome.
My framework BFF, and it includes a couple of other items that we didn't touch on today, just sticking to profitability. But I'm happy to have you put that out there.
Amazing. That is so kind of you. We will definitely get that in the Impact School community. I'll be using that myself. You've been so generous with your time. Seriously, can't thank you enough. This was incredible. So again, if anybody would like to speak to Deb about her offers, she's lifted the curtain, told all her pricing. She's even showed you inside her own accounts. So have a chat with her. She's a badass. You can find her in the Impact School community. Deb, we are so grateful for you. Thank you so much. And Reza, thanks for playing along. That was fun. So guys, I appreciate you. Have an awesome day, everybody. And that's all for now. Deb, unless you have any final words.
Nope. Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.